Trump right now does really appear to be quite sincere about, extending the olive branch to Russia, and it looks like he really does want this war to end. He doesn't want the U.S. to continue to support the military effort. Now, so I think there is a real chance that the U.S. might just cut off supplies. There was some claim, I think Trump himself, in fact, said it. Yeah, that we're not sending, but from other sources here we are. The arms flow has not been cut off. So you never want to take any one comment by Trump, too seriously. But even so that, Trump is, his words always need to be taken with a grain of salt. You usually have to divide whatever figure he puts out there, whatever number he gives, you have to divide by 10 or multiply by 10. It's just like, he just,
it helps you orientate yourself where things are going, though. You can't take anything too literal. It's just get a feeling of what.
He's just not a details guy. Let's put it that way. It's kind of politely, but you get a sense, his general orientation is quite obvious, and again, it was made manifest in that UN security vote. But his commitment to peace with Russia is going to be really put to the test if indeed they walk away, and I think that's a possibility because I don't think there will be a settlement. I just don't think that. That the two sides will actually be able to reach an agreement on Ukraine. Certainly, a settlement that Ukraine and Europe will agree to. But even for the U.S., I think it's very hard that they'll be able to accept Russian terms. So the more likely scenario is that we walk away because it seems like they really just do want to wash their hands of Ukraine. The current administration does. And it's not just Trump, I think that's important. It's the people around him, seem to like Hegseth and Marco Rubio. I think they really do want to just get out of Ukraine. And I think they're just going, they're approaching it from a realist perspective. He said, we just don't, unlike Biden who claimed, we're the US of A, we can fight as many wars as we want. They understand you can't be fighting on all these different fronts. So they want to close at least one front down. Okay, but let's just say they do walk away. And then, like I've said before, what happens when the Russians cross the Dnieper, when the Russians approach Odessa, or lay siege to Odessa, or maybe even Kiev, we don't know. We don't know. And then, I think that would be a time, Trump his commitment would really be put to the test because people will start drawing parallels between him and Joe Biden. The fall of Afghanistan and the fall of Ukraine. And he does not want that to happen. We'll see, maybe the Russians will have a way of finessing it. I think they've actually dealt with Trump very, very skillfully. They're very, very careful not to contradict him directly. Or if they do it, that's always in very diplomatic language, unlike Zelensky. Right? And then I think they're probably very open to something like a deal, an economic cooperation deal, because it gives Trump a win. And if it's, if it makes sense on their side too, why not? Give him a win. Okay, he couldn't make a settlement, but he can come back to the American people and say, look, I did this. This means so much more wealth for us, jobs and so on and so forth.
Well, so wouldn't that be part of?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Wouldn't that be part of a settlement, though, if there was some kind of economic deal?
But I don't think we're going to have that settlement. But we could do these other things. See, the thing is, maybe you fail to reach a settlement on Ukraine, but that doesn't prevent you from doing other things. Again, we could nuclear arms control treaties. That's something that we really should do. And we don't have to end the Ukraine war to do that. Or economic cooperation, a lessening of the sanctions. All of those things can be done. I think, it would be wise really for the administration just to set Ukraine aside and work on those things. And all those things benefit the U.S., they don't just benefit Russia. And if Trump can make that case, then it may be easier for him, again, to walk away and stay away from Ukraine. But I do worry, it's just like at some point the pressure to go back into Ukraine could be extreme. And Trump, it's clear he has these preferences, but I just don't find him utterly reliable. And, one thing he is very much concerned about is his own image. And if he's portrayed as a loser, and hopefully, he'll be politically skillful enough, and he'll be helped by the Russians in different ways to avoid that stigma. But it's going to be tough going for a while.
Yeah, but I mean the idea of walking away contradicts directly with the idea of having some type of mineral deal, right? I mean, you can't walk away and then just
right. That's the thing. That's a downside to the mineral deal. It's just that, and it does contradict in general the rhetoric, the statements that we're getting from the administration. If you do tie yourself to it, then right, like I was saying, then you actually have an interest in trying to bolster the Kiev regime and to help them hold the line.
Right. I mean, yeah, you can't just walk away and then just be like, all right, we're going to go in and just start extracting some minerals. Don't mind us, Russia and Ukraine. Yeah, it's fine around us. We're,
yeah,
we're,
right.
So to me, I mean, I just feel like Zelensky, his days are numbered. It seems clear. I mean, he talked about resigning. It depends on who comes into power in Ukraine, and is it going to be I mean, how much influence? I mean, we did the Maidan coup in 2014. Is the U.S. going to put its levers on and put its own person in power? Will Ukraine, is it even capable of having democratic elections at this point? I mean, there's so many arms that have been pumped into Ukraine. He talked about the people in power are the ones with the guns. So, is it even possible to have a democratic election? Like, if you don't have a real, I believe the sentiment within most of Ukraine is that they are exhausted from this war, economically, just living in fear of press gangs, of, there's no freedom. It just sounds like a nightmare place to be right now. So I imagine they want this war to end. And then if there was a true fair election, they had a government in power that said, okay, guys, like you said, we will establishing neutrality. And what's great is we are open for business for Russia and the United States. We can actually be very prosperous as this neutral place, as this bridge, this link between the East and the West. And I don't know, maybe I'm being too optimistic and naive that there's this potential to flourish. And then that, I'm sure it'll take a long, long time to rebuild, of course. But I mean, just theoretically, I feel like it's possible. And if you have a businessman like Trump, and seems to be, and the Russians also seem to be interested in doing some type of business, might be some way to get a deal that benefits everybody, because that's how deals should work, and the fear is that we just relegate the Ukraine to the sideline, and their interests aren't observed at all, when really we were just thinking about what is, will this be in the best interest of the Ukrainian people as well? Like, how much say do they have in the matter? Are they even capable of having a say in their future,
Yeah, the problem is that the regime has no interest in peace, and no interest in ending the war. I mean, that's clear. I mean, the regime is currently headed by Zelensky. But you don't see anybody on the horizon that could take Ukraine to this, theoretical land of prosperity. And I agree, theoretically it's true. Ukraine has a lot of things going for it, but it has been misruled ever since it got its independence back in 1991. I mean, it's just like I've said before, Ukraine never got out of the 90s. Russia did under Putin, but Ukraine never did. It's been chaotic, it's been corrupt, it's been ruled by oligarchs, and increasingly by this ultranationalist, faction, the Banderites would call them, and they have the power, and to some extent they've affected the thinking of the population too. In general, they were just some freaks on the right, but now they've taken control of schools and of all of the media, and it's affected the way the average Ukrainian thinks. Still there are many who, of course, oppose the Banderites, but they are powerless, and you see it when you look at the opinion polls. I mean, the only other like viable candidate, the one that actually I think every opinion poll shows would defeat Zelensky soundly is Zelensky. And he's, if anything, he's more of a Banderite than Zelensky is. Zelensky, the former, head of the armed forces in Ukraine. Yeah, interestingly, actually, Putin recently discussed the possibility of Zelensky becoming president, and he said that would actually be to the detriment of the SMO, because Zelensky is just a more reasonable, realistic military leader. I remember, I think, like he was thinking, hey, we need to pull out of Bakhmut. We can't hold this. We need to pull out of Andreevka. It was around that time that he was fired and replaced by Sersky, who is just a yes man to Zelensky. And Putin said that. They just said Zelensky is just an utter fool and incompetent when it comes to military affairs. So if Zelensky takes power, and he's a Banderite, he's not interested in peace or ending the war, but he would fight the war, more effectively from the Ukrainian side, and it would take longer for the Russians to attain victory. I mean, that's a realistic thing. There's again, it's still it's you just don't see anybody in Ukraine that is looking that at least has a voice. Maybe because it's just not possible now. If you speak out, as many politicians and political parties have found, if you speak out for peace, you're immediately labeled, a Putin apologist, and you're likely to end up in prison, and your party is likely to be banned. That's happened again and again. So maybe we don't even know how much of an opposition is there, but it has no presence because. The people that run the country, will not allow that kind of opposition. So the candidates that we look at are Zelensky, I think Poroshenko, and Poroshenko has proven himself, during his term as president of Ukraine, that he was every bit as much a warmonger as the others.
Right.
So it just, you just don't see it. Theoretically, you're right. That's not the reality in Ukraine now. You just don't see anybody that's presenting any kind of option to the current, policies.
Well, I think Russia probably understands that, right? That there's nobody really that there's no way for the current system, the current regime, there's no way for a real dissident party to rise. They'll just be imprisoned or killed. Do you think the U.S. is realizing that? And if both Russia and the U.S. realize that, do they have any levers and pressure that they can pull to stop that, to allow for a truly fair democratic election to take place in Ukraine?
Yeah, well, Russia doesn't have any levers.
It's military, which it's been moving constantly, right. I guess.
But there's really nothing else they can do other than what they're doing now. The U.S. obviously does, because truth be told, Ukraine is just utterly dependent on the U.S. And I think most of the Ukrainian leadership, I think, or who knows, Zelensky himself seems to be deluded. He seems to be thinking, okay, we can do it alone. We and Europe, it's going to be Ukraine and Europe united. That's the kind of language you're hearing from him now. But that's just not the truth. That's not the reality. And the U.S. does have enormous leverage. It really could push them into fair elections. Yeah, that's one thing the question is, could they be fair? Well, if you suppressed all these parties and suppressed all opposition media, which they've done over the course of many years, that started actually well before the SMO. Some people say, well, it was wartime, and President Lincoln did similar things in the U.S., but it started well before the SMO. So how can you have fair elections? The people really are being denied real options. You're given a different personality, somebody who might be a bit more competent, but subscribes to the same ideology, actually with maybe even greater fervor. I'm talking about Zelensky, of course, and Poroshenko has shown himself to be no different from Zelensky when it comes to relations with Russia and support for the war.
You're not giving me a lot of solutions here,
I
man.
know I'm not. Yeah, no, it does look pretty bleak. I am hopeful about, a way that I wasn't before, cautiously hopeful about U.S.-Russia relations. One thing that's like we haven't seen the ATACMS fired into pre-2014 territory ever since Trump took office. And that's really good news. That was putting us on the brink of a major escalation that could potentially lead to World War III. And that, at least for the moment, seems to be off the table. And I think we can again be cautiously hopeful that it will remain off the table. And if we can, this ugly war is a tragedy, above all for Ukraine and secondarily, for Russia. Unfortunately, I think it is going to continue. Because it's just the forces that are in Ukraine. The only chance really is that the U.S. will really bear down hard on Ukraine and just say, hey, this is not going to work. We're going, maybe we can forget this mineral deal. Instead, let's actually try to bring some common sense to your leadership. Let's open things up and have a discussion about reality. Okay, can we do that?
Right.
And the U.S. has does have the levers to bring that about. So far, I haven't seen them use it. I mean, the comments by Trump are helpful, calling him a dictator. And I think maybe we did see an impact from that within Ukraine, because it was shortly after that there was a vote taken in the Rada, the Ukrainian parliament, on extending Zelensky's term, under martial law, as president. And it failed. And that never happened before. Now, they took a second vote, I think it was yesterday, and then it passed. But it took some...
Why do you think that happened? Were they just threatened, guns pointed at them, say, we're doing this again?
Or at least some arm twisting, what happened, But that had to be a shock to Zelensky, and that's really a warning shot. Look, your days are numbered. And I think we can attribute that directly to the conflict between him and Trump. A lot of people are saying, this is Zelensky is a dead man walking. He took on our main benefactor. What's he doing? That was like his main selling point. It's like, I get the goods. I go out there and people, to Europe and the US, and the people applaud me, and I come back with billions of dollars in arms. But now you're biting the hand that feeds you, and everyone else in Ukraine is looking at him, looking at Zelensky, and saying, why keep you now? If you're doing this, you're cutting ourselves off from our main benefactor. We better get somebody else in here.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine Zelensky staying in power much longer. But like you said, it's as long as the Banderites are in control, I just don't see I don't see the Trump administration be able to do what they want to do with the mineral deal if they're in control either. It's like you need to have a group that is truly open for peace, that wants neutrality. Then you can be open for business in terms of anything else, and things can move forward.
Yeah, the corruption is also a huge problem. It's actually, the corruption is probably an impediment to this mineral deal too, because a lot of this mineral wealth, how accessible it is and how much there actually is, I'm not sure. But a lot of it was sold or given away to oligarchs and powerful men within Ukraine years ago. And I think that's one thing that's put Zelensky in a panic. It's not just, it's like, okay, these guys they're going to turn on me if I cut them out of this. I had promised them this wealth, and that was part of what props me up. And now, hey, the U.S. is coming and demanding. It's like there's we had this. He made a deal with a local mafia, and then the head man from the big international mafia comes and says, "No, I want this," and he's in a terrible fix. I would not want to be in his shoes right now.
Yeah. I just feel so bad for the Ukrainians. They've been in such an awful position, and we just spent the last 30, 45 minutes just trying to find a light at the end of the tunnel, and we don't really see much of one yet. It's like there are possibilities if the U.S. really pulls some real levers, but
Yeah.
it's all speculation at this point.
Right.
Yeah, God, well,
Yeah. Well,
what a nightmare
maybe
for
when
them.
it comes, to true total collapse, there is a possibility like that the army will turn on the government. The army will even sue for peace. Say we've just lost too many of our men. This is enough. It could happen. We're not there yet, but it might be. We can be surprised, because obviously there are these tremendous stresses that are being put on Ukrainian society and on the army, and I don't think we can assume that they're going to be solidly in support of their government, all the way to the end. There are certain units like the descendants of the Azov Battalion, they're going under different names there, and other ultra nationalist units that probably will fight to the very end. But I don't think that's true of all the army, and there just may be a point where, civil war could break out, and maybe the more reasonable forces could win, and they could make a real deal with Russia. We don't see that, but it's just like you see the logic. I think that those pressures are real, those stresses are real, and yeah, I think at some point they're going to manifest themselves in real political and potentially military conflict within Ukraine.
Guys, thanks for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please check out my website, Nobliski.io. You can look at the pinned comment below. It's something that I think you'll find useful. Even my dad uses it. My wife uses it. Instead of Googling things, you should be using this website because you get access to OpenAI, Perplexity, Anthropic, DeepSeek. There's hundreds of models that you can use. It's what I use to create the thumbnail images, things like this. And the greatest thing about it is there's no rate limits. There are no subscription fees. It's free to try out and use. You get free tokens every day. So if you're not a heavy AI user, you will never have to pay for anything. But this is really my passion project. I really want to get it off the ground, and I think you guys would like it. So yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you have time to download the apps and give it 5 stars, that'd mean a lot to me as well. Thanks a lot.